We have an action-packed free agent and trade rumor video for you here today. We're looking at all the latest updates on guys like Jack Eichel, Seth Jones, Oliver Ekman Larsson, Vladimir Tarasenko, as well as Taylor Hall. We're obviously going to discuss the Stanley Cup, which was awarded last night to the Tampa Bay Lightning, and we have a signing as well. All that and more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned today, we have an action-packed video with all kinds of information. Now that the Stanley Cup has been awarded, we're officially 100% into the offseason now. The rumor mill is really kicked up into full gear. So before we jump into a lot of the rumors though, I want to acknowledge a couple of other items. First up, I want to talk about last night's game-deciding victory here by the Tampa Bay Lightning to win the Stanley Cup over the Montreal Canadiens. A very tight 1-0 game. Game-winning goal scored by youngster Ross Colton late into the game here for the Lightning to win their second consecutive Stanley Cup. So certainly a huge victory. Tampa Bay certainly appeared to be the best team in the playoffs. There's no doubt about it. The Habs had a terrific run, but they ran into a really solid team with the Lightning. There's no passengers on that team. They are so deep and so strong from line 1 to line 4, all 6D, the goaltending. Like, it's just absolutely stacked on that roster. And, you know, they certainly are the Cup champions. Now we're likely going to see some more activity around Tampa here in the coming days as they start to make decisions on who stays and who goes. There's obviously major cap implications there as well. When it comes to Montreal, I think they have a lot to be proud of. They had one heck of a season. Didn't have the greatest regular season, but as they say, when you get into the playoffs, anything can happen. They were an 18th ranked team in the regular season, and they made it all the way to the Stanley Cup Finals, mostly on hard work and determination and really solid defense. I mean, hats off to them. One heck of a run. Obviously fell a few wins short of the Stanley Cup, but you have to think with the youngsters that they have on that roster, they gained some pretty valuable experience like Suzuki and Caulfield and Romanov and some other guys that are there for the long haul like Toffoli and Anderson and Gallagher. And this team is in good hands, and I would suspect that it will be a little bit easier than you would think to get back to this point in the near future. It's really, really hard to get to the Stanley Cup Finals. It's really even harder to stay there, and it's not going to be an easy task. But with the players that they have coming back for sure, a big part of the future, I do think they have a lot to look forward to. So hats off to both teams. Like I said, the Stanley Cup goes to Tampa. The Conn Smythe Trophy awarded to goaltender Andrei Vasilevskiy, who in my opinion is the absolute best goaltender in the world right now. Vasilevsky's record when it comes to elimination games, is getting shutouts in elimination games and bouncing back after a loss is absolutely ridiculous. Not to say that there isn't a lot of other great goalies, but he just seems to be the most clutch guy right now in the entire world, in my opinion. And obviously, they're well stacked. He's the first goaltender since Ken Dryden way back in the 70s as well to win back-to-back Stanley Cup championships and to play every single game and every minute for his team. It's not something you see very often. Obviously, the playoffs are a long grind, and to have your team go all the way 2 years in a row and never once even turn to the backup goalie, even for like a few minutes or a period, is almost unheard of. So hats off to him and everybody for a terrific season. It was a difficult season with all the protocols in place, but the NHL and its players got through it here once again, and hopefully by the time the next season starts up in the fall, we should hopefully be back to normal, have full buildings everywhere, and see if we can get back to a somewhat normal regular NHL season. Now on to the rest of the news here for today. I want to start off with a signing by the Toronto Maple Leafs. They've signed defenseman Travis Dermott to a 2-year contract extension. He was slated to become a restricted free agent. He gets a 2-year deal at an average annual value of $1.5 million. So that's $3 million total over 2 years, so it's a decent contract for him. And I wonder what this means for their expansion draft plans. Obviously, we know that a couple of defensemen ahead of them are going to be protected for sure. Obviously, Morgan Rielly, Jake Muzzin, TJ Brody could very well be the top three, which I would assume will be protected in this draft. But it's not a shocker if the Leafs go with 8 skaters and protect 4D, which means that guys like Dermott or Hall could be exposed. So I don't know, are they putting more of a contract here in place for him that's attractive to make sure Seattle might want to take him over another player? Or does this mean if they do protect 4D that he'll be that guy and maybe they expose Justin Hall instead? Obviously, they need cost certainty with this cap situation. They also need some solid players, so I'm not sure what they do. A guy like Alex Kerfoot very well could still be the guy that goes. It's difficult to say, but I'm just curious to see if this will have any impact on how they decide to do their protection list. Now, staying with Toronto, we did get another bit of a rumor bomb, I guess you could say, from Darren Dreger, talking about some free agents around the Leafs, obviously. And he mentions Taylor Hall on Insider Trading here in TSN, talking about how there's certainly interest from the Boston Bruins to bring back Hall, which is not a huge surprise. It's pretty well known out there that there's mutual interest, I think it's fair to say, between the Bruins and Hall to get a new contract in place and keep him in Boston. And he certainly acknowledges that, but he does mention that there's also outside interest in Hall as well, which might kind of, ratchet up the pressure a little bit on Boston to get something done before free agency kicks in. And he mentions that the Toronto Maple Leafs have interest should he make it to free agency. Now, obviously, the Maple Leafs are going to be an interesting team to watch. They obviously have a lot of money tied up in their big four. We just mentioned the Seattle expansion draft and how that's going to impact them. I think they're obviously going to be fair to say they're disappointed after another early playoff exit. I'm sure there will be changes. I'm not really sure that Taylor Hall makes the most sense for them. Not to say that he couldn't be a good player for them. I think after he played the way he did in Boston, that there will be more interest than usual in Hall, given that he played the best we've seen in a couple of years. So obviously any teams out there would be more willing to sign him now than they were maybe even a year ago, or to trade for him at the NHL deadline that just went by before the end of this current season. So we'll see. I mean, according to Dreger, there is interest from Toronto, but I personally think he stays in Boston, and I'd be interested to see, though, if he does make it to free agency, if they try to bring yet another hometown boy back home to Toronto. Another big rumor that came out late last night, and we do have a dedicated video exploring it more in depth, so I'm not going to go into it a whole lot here. If you do want to get more details on the situation, certainly I'll put it in the YouTube cards. But Vladimir Tarasenko is officially requested a trade from St. Louis. We got the word last night from Jeremy Rutherford, who covers the Blues for The Athletic, breaking the news last night that indeed is official. I mean, his name has been in the rumor mill for some time, but now we kind of have a better idea as to why. And then Elliot Friedman chimed in on his podcast that came out this morning and indicated that it's not just the fact that Tarasenko's requested a trade. He feels it's mutual and that St. Louis was ready to move on from him anyway, and that they gotta both agree that it's time to go separate ways. So obviously this is going to be another big superstar that could be on the move. It could be the summer of blockbusters, as I mentioned a couple of times here on the channel. I think this offseason is going to be absolutely mayhem and chaos, with all kinds of big names possibly being on the move, or at least being discussed in a lot of trade rumors. So it's going to be pretty crazy, and we could see more activity than we've seen in a long time, or at least as long as I've had my channel here, for sure. But in the case of Tarasenko, we don't really have a lot of teams right now that he's linked to. There is believed to be a list. There was a list that was leaked out back about a week or so ago. And to be honest, like I said in that video, I don't really know that a lot of the teams on there are legit. But we will see. It's certainly a situation to watch very closely. Things can come together fast at times, and we'll have to watch that scenario. But Tarasenko is officially on the trade block by Doug Armstrong in the St. Louis Blues. Now, before we jump into the remaining trade rumors, I do need to pause for a moment here and acknowledge our channel sponsor, Manscaped. Top Shelf Hockey is proud to be sponsored by Manscaped. Of course, with Manscaped, we have a special offer here for all Top Shelf Hockey viewers, where you can get 20% off and free shipping into all orders at manscaped.com. Now, of course, Manscaped just launched a brand new Lawnmower 4.0 trimmer, which is a fantastic product. They've taken the level up here, even again with the skin-safe replaceable blades. It's waterproof, it's wireless charging, has a travel lock on it, as well as a nice light so you don't miss what you're doing. So certainly a terrific product. Now, many people associate Manscaped with their trimmers, which is certainly kind of their top product, but they do have a lot of other great options as well, including what they call the Weed Whacker, which is another trimmer for your ears and nose. And they have a variety of deodorants and sprays as well, which also keep you fresh and are terrific as well. So certainly Manscaped has a lot to offer, and we certainly highly recommend all of their products. So check out manscaped.com and use promo code TSH for 20% off and free shipping. Alright, welcome back. Thanks for watching that promotional video. I greatly appreciate it. Now, moving on to some more tidbits of information that came from the latest 31 Thoughts podcast. Elliot Friedman goes on to update us on the Seth Jones situation and the trade that's likely coming from the Blue Jackets rear guard anytime now. It could happen soon, or it could be after the expansion draft. It's difficult to say. But one big update he provided is it looks as though the Philadelphia Flyers might actually be out on Jones. And it's not that they've lost interest. I think Chuck Fletcher and the Flyers are still very, very interested in Jones, but the problem is they appear like they don't want to do the deal unless they can get him to sign an extension. They're not in a situation where they want to give up some pretty good assets here and just to bring them in for a one-year rental. That's not really what they want to do. They want to fix the blue line, and they want it more on a permanent basis, more than one season, and I don't entirely blame them. So therefore, he believes that unless Jones is willing to sign, which right now all indications point to that he won't, that the Flyers won't be pursuing a trade in that regard, and they could end up looking in other areas and go in another direction for another right shot defenseman that they really covet here to add to their team that they need to replace especially they need a partner for Provorov. There's no doubt that's high on their priority list, and we'll see what gets done, but obviously that makes things probably more likely for Chicago or Colorado to be the trading partner with the Blue Jackets. And if Jones is insisting on testing free agency next year, those are probably your most likely teams that would do it. I know the Avalanche were by far one of the main teams linked to him that wanted a rental deal anyway, so that could very well be a match. Now, Friedman does mention on the podcast that he does believe there are a couple of teams that Jones would sign a long-term extension with, that he's not completely ruling that out, and then he's not 100% set on testing free agency. He just wants to really, kind of see what's out there right now, and obviously if the right team comes along that he's willing to do that with, we could see it. But at this point, it really boils down to who wants to make the trade and who doesn't. And if the Avalanche want to go all in for next year, like some people think they are, then Jones would be an attractive option for them to add to that already really solid blue line. It might make things easier for them when it comes to expansion, because it's believed that, based on what they have for a roster, if they only protect 3D, then they're likely losing a D to Seattle. There's pretty much no doubt about it. Or we could see a trade ahead of expansion. I'm not sure when it's going to go down. But anyways, either way, the Avalanche would be a terrific fit for Jones if that's what he prefers. And it seems like it's trending in that direction right now. Now, Elliot Friedman also goes on to mention the latest on Jack Eichel. He doesn't have a lot of new intel, but he does indicate he believes that Vegas is indeed sniffing around Eichel, was his exact words, saying that they are certainly getting themselves into the mix here, which really shouldn't come as a huge surprise. As I mentioned, after they were eliminated by Montreal, it's clear and evident that their top priority should be at least to get a top center iceman. That's by far their weakest position, and it's such an important part of the team. For any team to be successful on a long playoff run, you have to be deep down the middle, and it's their area of weakness. They're deep on the blue line, they're deep on the wings, they got a couple of good goaltenders. The center position, not so much. So they have multiple players who could be like a 2, 3, 4, but not really a solid number 1 in my opinion, and Eichel could be that guy. Now, obviously, they'd have to move out some money to do it. And if they do trade Marc-Andre Fleury, that would give them $7 million towards the 10 of his contract to offset here. So you throw in a couple of more assets in an Eichel trade, and it doesn't mean it'd be a Fleury for Eichel trade. That may not be something that we see, but if they do trade Fleury, regardless of where he goes, that's going to help. And then you throw in a couple of roster players and picks and prospects for Eichel, and you might have yourself a deal that actually works for Vegas. They have guys like Glass and Krebs that could be included. You could throw in some draft picks that they have. You could throw in a player or two off the roster. Maybe a guy like an Alex Tuck, for example, who's a really solid player for them, but would be more expendable than some of their other top wingers. There's other options too, like a Marchessault or a Smith. Like, I'm not sure who they move, but you'd have to take some kind of a contract off the roster along with a couple of prospects picks. Maybe one of their younger defensemen, like a White Cloud, might be something that Buffalo really wants to. Difficult to say, but either way, they have the pieces to get it done. Friedman believes they're sniffing around, and seeing as how aggressive they've been the last few years, it would not be shocking if they find a way to pull it off, or at least I believe they'll remain in the conversation here right down to the wire. Now, Nick Kypreos as well has some information to suggest that the Canucks appear to be in on Oliver Ekman Larsson, according to him and his sources. Now, it's believed that they're also looking to move defenseman Nate Schmidt, and that they're trying to move Schmidt not only because he wants out, but if they can accommodate that, then they can free up enough space to at least be closer to acquiring Ekman Larsson. Now, we know last year Jim Benning seemed to be pretty fixated on bringing the Swedish defenseman to Vancouver after it was revealed that Ekman Larsson and the Coyotes were exploring a trade, and that the Canucks and the Bruins were the only two teams he would waive his no-move clause for to make that happen. Now, I suggested that maybe the Canucks or Bruins might get in the mix again, knowing that there's interest, but no matter who it is, it's going to be tough to do given his contract. Now, Arizona is going to likely have to take back a contract of their own here going the other way. That's not preferable, that's maybe a bigger money deal. That's obviously not, a great contract, something that they would prefer it, though, to be a shorter term or a little less money. So we'll see about that. Vancouver does have their fair share of not so great contracts. I'm not sure how they do that, but still it's something that could be worked out. And it's also possible that the Arizona Coyotes may have to retain some salary too. Now, to further this conversation as well, Friedman does mention again on the podcast today that he believes from what he's heard that the Ekman Larsson Arizona exit interview at the end of the season was one of the shortest ones ever. That they basically both sat down and agreed that it was both time to move on both sides. So if they're on the same page here, I think he'll open up to more teams if he's decided that, you know what, it's time for me to move on. That's why they're going about this differently this year. He's not giving them a list of teams. They're working with the entire league, and if they find a trade that they find suitable, they'll present it to him and see if he takes it. So at this point, we don't know exactly what he's willing to do, but if the Canucks are in the mix, based on how fixated Jim Benning was last year, this would not shock me. As much as I'm not entirely convinced it's the best thing for them, they could go from a not so great contract with Nate Schmidt to a possibly even worse contract with Ekman Larsson here, and it doesn't mean that they're going to be involved in the same deal either. Schmidt does have a modified no trade, and if he has Arizona on his list of teams he won't go to, then obviously that's a problem and they can't be included. But still, it's something they might be able to figure out. But they have a lot of other bigger things to do this year too. They also have to sign Pettersson and Hughes. I mean, those are going to be big contracts, like, you know, foundational pieces for the next number of years, depending on how long they sign for. So they're going to be an extremely busy team, an interesting team to watch here. I don't know how exactly they're going to tackle this, but according to Kypreos, they're trying to move Schmidt. Very interested in bringing back Ekman Larsson. We'll see what happens. I know sometimes Kypreos' info is okay, but other times it's a little bit not as accurate. So we're going to have to watch this situation closely and see if any other really well-respected insiders are popping up with similar type of information. Lastly here as well, I want to talk about the possibility of the New York Islanders making a side deal with Seattle and how this could possibly help them get a little bit out of their cap crunch that they're facing here this offseason. Now, the Islanders, like many teams, don't have a lot of space. They have some important pieces that are RFAs to bring back, like Beauvillier and Pelech and Sorokin, and they have some not-so-great contracts they'd like to move on from if they could, but they're not going to be easy. They've got the Andrew Ladd contract for starters. They got Leo Komarov, another one, maybe Nick Leddy, Jordan Eberle. Like, some of these guys are going to have to go, and Lou's going to have to figure out a way to make it happen if he's going to have a shot at keeping this team as competitive as possible for next year. They'd like to bring back Casey Cizikas. That's also going to be challenging given the dynamics of their cap situation here. So I came across an article here on Eyes on Isles blog, and it's kind of interesting on how they could make a side deal with the Kraken to get a good deal and to save some cap space and come out of the expansion draft relatively unscathed. So essentially it goes over the fact that they're likely going to expose Nick Leddy on defense. So obviously that's somebody that they wouldn't mind losing. Obviously he's a decent defenseman, but the contract is something they would prefer to move on from. If they can get that space back, that would be even better. And it also talks about the fact that young forwards like Kiefer Bellows and Otto Koivula are likely your other two players that Seattle is going to consider. It's probably going to be one of those three guys. I mean, you could see guys like Clutterbuck or Martin exposed, but if those other options are there, and they likely will be, it's more than likely going to be one of those guys that end up getting selected. So if they make a side deal here with Seattle, obviously they'd have to give up some additional assets to do it. So for example, Seattle and the Islanders could agree that those three players are the most interested to the Seattle Kraken, and the deal could be this. It could be Seattle taking on Leo Komarov in the final year of his contract at $3 million. They get a second-round draft pick. They also get prospect Ruslan Ishikov, who is a 2018 draft pick, another Russian center iceman. Played 2 years at the University of Connecticut and played this past year over in Liga and had some really solid offensive stats. Like, he looks like a pretty decent prospect, and as much as it would kind of suck to lose him, it would probably hurt worse to not be able to move some of these unfavorable contracts. So if you get Leo and these two assets go to Seattle, so obviously they're given an incentive to take on Komarov's contract, and then in return Seattle says, okay, we'll take that, and then you get to pick which of these three players that we end up taking. So they get to either get Bellows, Koivula, or Leddy. Now, of course, if the Islanders really get to pick, and Leddy's included, they're probably picking Leddy, and Seattle could end up with Leddy and Komarov. Now, I don't expect them to be that fortunate here, so I would suspect that Bellows or Koivula will end up being the player that's Sale ends up getting here, but still, they get a player that's predetermined by the Islanders, and in return for a couple of extra assets, they also take Komarov off their hands. The deals like that are going to be readily discussed, and we could see numerous amounts of those around the NHL here heading into this expansion draft. I don't know if teams will learn their lesson from Vegas or not. A lot of insiders and people around the league think that they have. I'm not entirely convinced that they have, because there's a lot of good pieces here that could be up for grabs if they don't make these kinds of side deals. So we'll see what happens, but it could be a way for the Islanders to kind of save some space and to move a bad deal here. So we'll see if the Kraken and the Islanders work out any kind of side deals, and if Lou can work any magic. Let me know your thoughts on something discussed here today down in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news and rumors in all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.